I was curious with you, because as long as I've known you, you've always like openly spoke about therapy. What made you want to get into it?
I was kind of forced into it.
Okay.
Hurricane Katrina happened when I was turning 16, and
Yeah.
it was like super traumatic. I lost my home, everything. My family was like homeless, trying to figure out where we were gonna go. And through the kindness of strangers, we were able to like live in someone's rental property, and that was in Texas. In that time, I was extremely angry and resentful. I just kind of felt like I was walking through the world just tight.
Happy Self-Love Saturday, whoop whoop. Okay, so today is a very special video. I am having a discussion with one of my great friends, Marcel Spears, who some of you may recognize him from the CBS hit television show, The Neighborhood. We are gonna be discussing therapy, trauma, how to deal with all of the stuff that's going on right now. We're gonna just be having a very open discussion, and we're also gonna be including his own therapist in this discussion so that she can also give us some legitimate advice and what to do.
We're from New Orleans, which is a predominantly Black city. I was in a gifted art program. I was like jamming. I was in a groove.
Yeah.
And then I went to this all white space, place that I hadn't ever been in. And that did not help me with my anger.
Yeah.
I was getting into a lot of fights. I was dealing with young kids who did not understand microaggressions. Honestly, I didn't understand microaggressions. I just knew that shit wasn't cool that they were saying.
Yeah.
And so I came from a place where you fight about that kind of stuff. Like, and then I went to college, and I was still sort of kind of getting into trouble in those ways, getting into fights and different things like that. And I was, as a part of like academic probation, they recommend you go to therapy. Therapy is free in college, in many colleges around the country. I went to Prairie View A&M University, HBCU. It's not free, actually. You pay for it. It's built into the cost of tuition. They forced me into a semester, which is about like 2 or 3 months of therapy. And I loved my therapist. Like at first I was really resistant, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know like what you say. You see like these sort of cliche images of people like laying on the couch and just crying. And I was just like, I'm not about to do that shit.
For sure. Or the images that you do see is the person so mad that they don't talk at all.
Right. It took a while for me to like open up to it. Felt like I was super reactive. I felt like I was just like paranoid, and like I had a lot of anxiety around loss, losing friends, from losing my home, and people dying that I knew and grew up with, and feeling sort of out of place. So I had like this sort of just severe anxiety around losing people. I honestly didn't have the vocabulary or like the self-awareness to know like where that was coming from. I just knew that I was like dealing, and I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to deal with that anymore. And in the process of therapy, me not really trusting it, me not knowing what it was, I realized, oh, this is the place where I can like talk about it, and nobody thinks that I'm stupid, or nobody thinks that I'm weak, or being too emotional, or like growing up in the South as a Black man, like there's not a lot of flexibility, or at least typically there isn't a lot of flexibility with emotions. Like you're happy, you're angry, and you are like reserved in sadness. Like that's it. That's it. Nobody ain't got no time for all these emotions. Like nobody don't have no time for all these feelings.
You know what I realized that, which is, I mean, this is just, it was my aha, was I did a short film on Black men and self-love. My goal was to mimic one I'd done on women, and thinking it was going to be the same. And it was so different in just the conversations that the men were having in the uncomfortability with vulnerability across the diaspora too. Like this is, no matter where you are, that we put onto Black men in terms of how they are allowed to behave, whether it's like vocalized or not, because all of the guys basically said that like in white society, there's already like a way to behave. But then also within their Black community, there's already a way that they have to behave. Like so all of them kind of said in their own way, like that they don't always have a space to just like be a regular guy. And so I'm like, oh, it makes me sad, but it's a real I think it's it needs to be unpacked.
It doesn't, like, I'm learning in therapy, like that armor can be helpful
Yeah.
in certain situations. Like when used responsibly, it's good to like have your guard up around people that you maybe do not trust, but to still be open to like listen and hearing and like be present. I feel like people who, especially people who grow up in like tougher areas, who go through therapy, are like some of the best people, because they have a duality, or they're almost like emotionally bilingual, right? They can like cut it on and cut it off. Like it's a situation to where they can enter a space open, but if things seem or feel a little weird, it's easy to like like shut it down.
At the time when you went in college, did you tell your family?
I didn't tell my family because again, it was hard for me to like accept, and it was kind of a situation where I was like, this is a punishment, like whatever. It was, yeah, it was just like, it took me like, I would say 3 or 4 weeks to like even like actually talk and like be present.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it took like that because it was like 3 sessions. I was going like once a week, so it gave me an opportunity. It took me a while to like understand what it was for. I kept expecting this person to like take notes on me and like report back to the school like that something was wrong with me.
I would naturally, in hearing it, I was gonna ask you like, how would you be able, especially from in college, right? Because you just came out of high school, like, how would I be able to tell the difference between this and a guidance counselor?
Right. You really don't. You don't really know. You don't really know what it is.
So for one, it's kind of like, do you treat it like as if something major needs to be happening in your life for you to go, or do you treat it like more like a tune-up, like a haircut?
Like a tune-up. I think both.
Yeah.
So in like right now where I am in my personal therapy journey, I just can't, like last year, everybody's like bugging about 2020, but last year and the year before were really, really tough years for me. So I needed to go to therapy. I felt like I needed to go to therapy every week to just sort of like unpack and reflect and really figure out like what was happening, how I was feeling, and like just to get some tools on like how to navigate some of these really difficult situations. Now I'm going to therapy more for like just like general maintenance, like a tune-up. So I don't think therapy is something that you constantly have to be in. I think the point of therapy is to give you the tools to where you can like self-soothe and self-care. Like everybody needs therapy, especially Black people.
I was
Get the
going to say
tools.
too, because you talked about, I guess, the anxiety around loss.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to have after all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people, anxiety around like fear and loss, because people have lost their jobs, people have lost their family members, people have lost their housing, people have lost their sense of purpose. And so I'm like listening to you, I was like, oh shit, like, yeah, you've already kind of dealt with a major change already in your life. How do you feel now?
It's difficult, but one, having gone through a situation where you've typically lost everything except for like those very, very important things, like my family was okay, my health was okay, like we didn't always have a roof, but like we were okay, we had each other. It sort of created this flexibility in what I actually need. Like, if I lose something, I mourn it. It like hurts for a second, but then I try to figure out like, all right, what is the game plan? Like, how do I navigate this? How do I move forward? How do I get out of this? Even going to therapy, like that's almost a privilege because sometimes people can't afford it. There are a lot of different programs that give people access, but it's few and far between, and it depends on basically like winning the lottery about what area you live in to how much the local government values it.
I think even the thought of adding the expense of therapy is a privilege, right?
It's not even something that
most people cannot think in that way in terms of where they're stretching their money. And so that's where it kind of gets a little difficult because a lot of people need therapy, but in reality it's like, if you're like, listen, I'm just making my rent, or I'm just
do I go to therapy or do I eat today? Like,
but you also realize the necessity. That's why I think, like, especially after a time like this, I'm like, there's gonna have to be a change in the therapy system after this, because I genuinely believe a lot of people are gonna need something of some sort to just kind of unpack how they felt. I think more so on the loss of purpose. I feel like so many people, though they may have a roof over their head, they may have food in their fridge, they may have their family all together, but just not being able to go to work, not being able to be around their friends has shaken them so deeply that they're depressed. And this time, for the first time,
are feeling it.
And they're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know why I can't get up. I don't know. I'm not used to being this unproductive.
So like so many people are going to be in need of counsel and won't have access to it, won't know what to do.
Did you actively seek out a Black female therapist?
Yes. Well, not a Black female therapist. I actively sought a Black therapist.
Black therapist. Period.
It was incredibly important to me that I get a Black therapist, because that way I don't have to, or at least the assumption is, I wouldn't have to translate my Blackness.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain, or I'm not dealing with somebody else's subconscious biases about Blackness. Like, I don't want anybody to categorize me as an angry Black man, or without having any way of discerning what that might look like in actuality based on like how I respond. Like, Black men in my life have not been the most nurturing. Black men in my life have not been the most open. And so I didn't want to get a Black male therapist who would sort of be dismissive of a lot of what was going on with me. I didn't want to go through that. So I didn't have any of those feelings going to my therapist, Wynn.
I have friends who, when looking for their therapist, they are tapping into some of their own stuff because they're looking for the most specific person to be comfortable to talk to. Like, not just a Black therapist. It's got to be a dark-skinned therapist. It's got to be a natural therapist. It's got to be somebody with dreads. She's got to be over this age. It's like, oh, you want to talk to your mom? Oh, okay. Like, got it, right?
You're looking at the pictures of therapists and being like, nah.
And I think you said something that just, I think about often, the men in my life, they were all taught the same thing, which is like not necessarily show a lot of love to other men, and like as if men just kind of raise themselves, especially Black men. We're not supposed to hug. We're not supposed to sit beside each other like that. And I think that in itself is like a trauma. Like, they think it's kind of like this normal upbringing, but in the reality, no, there's something off with that. Like, it's okay for this man to show you love and to tell you that he cares for you, and to also be open to hearing your stories and to give you real advice.
Even me now, I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for a minute, and I'm an actor who, like, sometimes my job requires me to be like really emotionally available and like open. But even in my like personal life, I'm not comfortable crying or grieving in front of people. I shy away. Even with Wynn, there've been a couple of sessions to where like I'm trying to get out of the room so that I can go to my car.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So I can go to my car and Wynn is literally like, nope, sit down. And I'm just like, nah, session's over, I'm good. Like, I'm gonna head out. Like, it's one of those things where like it's so deep rooted, you don't even know where to go to like even unpack it. A lot of the things that I learned about like sort of stifling or tucking in being very emotional or being very loving towards Black men, I learned from other Black men outside of my family. Like, I'd be like walking through the world and they'd be like, yo, what's wrong with him? Like, why are they, like, that boy a little too sensitive, he a little too soft, like, why is he so like, don't be hugging on me like that, bro. Like, and so like you learn these things as you get older, and you just like start to adapt, and you're like, all right, cool, let's adapt. And that's like love, you know what I'm saying? It's one of those situations.
Were you ever aware of things that you kind of picked up along the way, and then things that were naturally you?
Yeah, so like my grandmother, before she passed, she would always say, she was like, Marcel, you were always extremely loving. You were always like really like just like always very outwardly expressive of like caring about people and like how you treated people in that way. And that's how I navigated my family life, my personal life. And I started to realize that I would shift that with friends who I thought were like my brothers. Like, I wouldn't really interact with them in the same way. You sort of start to see things, like you develop like this duality of like how you act in the house and how you act outside of the house, because you don't want to be perceived as weak. Also, like, being in theater helped open me up. A Black man in theater 9 times out of 10, people are automatically assuming
that you're gay.
that you a little soft, you
Yeah.
look gay, like there's something. And so I would like feel that and be like, how is that the automatic thing? Like, what are we talking about here? And so like I was kind of forced to like be more open-minded and be more mindful of the ways that I projected that fear onto other men, or projected that like looking at like I'm in the theater, I'm not gay, I'm the straight man in the theater, so I gotta be straight. Like y'all gotta know that I'm all man up in here. And it's just like, why are you doing that? Like, who's that for? Like, it's
there's
weird.
something with Black men and weakness that is just really deep rooted, and I find that I have this conversation.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to be weak. It's dangerous to be weak. As a Black man, it's dangerous to be weak.
I was going to jump in that it's the optics of it. I hate the word weak, but that's just coming from my background, because it's vulnerability. It's not weakness. And we call it weakness, and that's how the stereotype gets. It's bad. Vulnerability in men, particularly in Black men, is not something that is a good thing, or that's the way it's projected.
Yeah, it's not socially acceptable to be vulnerable. So thank you for correcting. Like, it isn't weakness, it is vulnerability.
And like I said, I did this short film, and that was like across the board the consensus, and I like purposely tried to cast it with men of all kinds of backgrounds, like ages, just so that I could get different experiences, skin tones, everything. And all across the board was this uncomfortability with weakness. I think after doing that project, I became very hyper aware and sensitive to Black men, and especially Black men's portrayal in the media. The images that Black men have to see of themselves on a regular basis. With what's going on right now with COVID and all of that kind of stuff. Even yesterday, I heard a statistic that it's affecting Black men the most, or Black men of a certain age group are.
There's a lot of information out there that is not correct.
And this is what I was like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, wait, what? Who said that?
Black men have enough to deal with without having been the ones that are are most affected by COVID. I don't know where that one comes from.
Like our actual social media news of the Ahmaud Arbery's and like, you know, within that, there's like 3 or 4 other ones that happen. And
I think Kevin Ross Jr., like another one.
That video and that experience was a little too much for me to post about. You know? And like that's where we're
talking about Ahmaud Arbery?
Yeah, and people are, and yes, we're in the social media age. Like that is where you get to fight, is like posting and sharing all of that kind of stuff. But I felt like exhausted, like I am being traumatized.
What has it got to be like to walk around a Black man in this society with constant hypervigilance? I actually talked to a couple of people, Black men. One of them is around 60. 2 of them were, and one of them was 18. Just to see what the difference is between, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of difference. I asked them, do people still cross the street when they see you coming? Yes.
Yes.
When you're, did anybody tell you about what you do when you're stopped by police? Hold the steering wheel and look forward. Yes. I mean, it goes all the way. It's nothing that has left our society at all. And I was always curious what it felt like to be a Black man and watch someone get slaughtered. A Black man gets slaughtered in the street. I can't watch that video. I haven't yet. That's just, and if I have that reaction, what is it like to be a Black man watching that? I'm very curious what you have to say about that, Marcel.
It's incredibly hard, right? The things you guys were talking about earlier with dealing with COVID, like as a person, you're always looking for ways to survive, right? So you're looking for something you can do, looking for actionable items. You're like, what can I do to give myself the best opportunity to survive? What can I do to protect myself? What can I do to protect my family? And you're inundated with this information that says there's nothing you can do to protect yourself. There's nothing you can do to protect your family. You are not safe anywhere you go. A 6-year-old Black man is gonna have a similar experience to an 18-year-old Black man, except they have history. Like they've been doing it for so long, it's second nature. People do so cross the street when I'm walking. But I see you, and I'm like, what does this person think of me? What's gonna happen if somebody calls the police saying that a Black man during the time of COVID is walking the neighborhood or like outside in front of my house? Like, what's gonna happen? That's gonna make the wrong officer suspicious, right? Because like, what are you doing? I lived in New York during stop and frisk, and I got stopped more times in New York than I ever did in the South. In response to like a lot of the police killings in particular, like you will have Black men to be like, yo, if they kill me, like I do, if something happens, I did not reach for a gun, or I did not do anything, or like in the case of Sandra Bland, like people are like, yo, if something happens like this, I didn't kill myself. Trust and believe, like that's not what I did. If they say that that's what I did, that's not what happens. And I've thought about putting videos like that up myself. I thought about being like, all right, should I leave like a digital will? All of these visuals of somebody who looks like you, somebody who could be you, being treated like less than human. Especially for Ahmaud Arbery, it's one of the situations to where I'm looking for a house right now. Like I'm thinking about buying a house, and there've been plenty of times where like I've just stopped in a neighborhood to just like look at a house that I thought was dope and like see a plan, like, oh, I want a pool, I want a fence like this or this, that, and the other. And just seeing this Black man go into this house, it's under construction, it's wide open. He isn't even the first person to have done that. Going into this house, probably just looking to be like, oh man, this is dope, or oh, that's what they're doing with it. This is cool, like I like the layout. And then that being the justification for why somebody could literally shoot him in the street, like it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart.
Thinking about this, well, I've been thinking about it a lot. And Andrea and I, being Black women, we have the same kind of trauma, but not to the extent that Black men have. And you have secondhand trauma, and which is exposure, indirect exposure to a trauma or some kind of painful psychological event. And not only do you have it because of Ahmaud Arbery and these other kinds of traumas that are happening, you have it when you're born. It's cellular to you now. You are going to be traumatized by something the minute you walk out the door. It's funny, I'm listening to you talk, Marcel, and I'm thinking, he's just talking about going to get a pizza. Like it's, you're not upset.
Every time I step outside of my house, looking at what happened to Botham Jean, like I don't even have to step outside of my house. Constantly hyper vigilant, and it's not even. It would be sad if it was something that I felt like I had to put effort into, but it's so second nature to me now. Yeah. It's not even something that I realize that I'm doing. I just do it.
Yeah, you all don't get a break. You don't. Any way you look at it, you've got a lot on your shoulders, and if you didn't come from a family that knew about these things, which I don't know too many Black men who did, you had to learn it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had a couple of really good people in your life that were instrumental in your becoming kind of grounded on what it is you need to know as an adult Black man. That there are so many Black men who don't get that, and then don't get the narrative or the conversation as an adult Black man to figure it out and tell their sons. And I'm curious what you think would be a good way to help educate Black men about these various issues, because like you said, y'all don't want to talk about it. It appears soft. You don't want to look like, your word, weak. How do we do this?
I think the interesting thing about vulnerability, specifically from one Black man to another, is that might be the one place to where nobody skimps on your education. I think that is the one place to where my father, my father's father, men in my life, pastors, preachers, friends, teachers, like they are all open about making sure you have a clear idea about you might not be, and it's so funny because it's almost second nature to me to do that to like my cousins or other like younger Black men that I care about and I feel like I can approach in that way. It's just like, look, you might not be doing anything wrong. You might not think you are a threat. But just because you don't feel like you're a threat doesn't mean that that's not how they see you. So when you are moving through this world, it's almost like it's like the first thing we inherit once we like leave Black boyhood. The first that's when you realize that you're not just a Black boy anymore. Like 11, 12, 13, people are telling you like, hey, watch out for the cops, or hey, they are watching you, so you got to be mindful of what you're doing. Hey, be careful about running with the wrong crowd, not because you could go to jail, but because somebody could associate you with these people and kill you for it. That is one of the areas where Black men are a little more open to being vulnerable. Don't be fooled or lulled into this sense of security or this sense of safety, because you're not safe. And I wish that was not true. I wish that was just paranoia. I wish that was bullshit, but it's not.
Yeah, way back when, you had to act in a certain kind of way. You didn't want to appear to be something that was outside the frame of what white America is.
Yeah.
Right.
You had to be, if you weren't stand up, if you didn't have the right kind of job,
Right.
a certain kind of person, then you were not a credit to your race,
Mm-hmm.
which means that you were outside the bounds of the community.
It's these like weird rules that make you have to go beyond being an upstanding citizen. You have to be like an upstanding Black person, right? You have to be seen as a productive member of society, not just to your own community, because they see you, they know you, you grew up there, but you have to be perceived that way from the outside. Black people police each other in that way. Like there's this whole thing of respectability politics. Like you can't respect me as a Black man unless I have on a suit. Like you can't respect me as a Black man if I'm wearing a hoodie. You can't respect me as a Black man if I speak a certain way, if I'm too profane at times, if I'm too comfortable in places. Like, and we do it to each other.
I think that I realized that I was unlearning was like, I was so accustomed to like growing up and being the only Black face, much less the only Black woman in white spaces, that I've had to, I guess, kind of learn how to block from so many microaggressions. Like, like it's like pick your battles on microaggressions when you're in those spaces, especially growing up, because you really don't have the language as to how to deal with things like that. And I found after a while as an adult, I like never wanted to be in spaces like that. I like always wanted to be around like lots of people of color, because I was so over having to bend and weave around somebody's going to say something to me about my color or my hair or just something so ignorant that you're like, I don't even know how to address this in this moment, and I don't want to be the voice of addressing this. And so I realized as an adult I had to unlearn the trauma with the Ahmaud story and everything that was going on. I just kept thinking, okay, there has to be some tools, because this is crazy at this point. Like for us to now, we've got to be all entertaining ourselves constantly online. Plus, we also got to be the protesters and the advocates, and then we've also got to break down how our ally friends should be properly dealing and talking to us and helping us. It's like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. This is just too much for us to think about. And then, you know, Marcel and I were even talking about this, like, God forbid if you have any kind of depression, if you have any kind of mental anxieties right now, like there's so many things that one person is just layering on and on and on and on and on, that, yeah, I felt truly when that video was being circulated, I actually felt like exhausted, like legitimately full-blown tired. And I felt bad because I felt like, oh, am I not like fighting? Am I not advocating? Am I not angry? Am I like, what's going on? Why am I just feeling like stopped in my tracks? Like just more like I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to post this. I don't want to share this. I don't want to anything, because I just felt helpless and very useless.
Yeah, it was for me, it was I couldn't breathe and a punch in the stomach. I was a kid of the 60s. I remember when my parents had to, or were protesting about whether a black man can wear a beard when he was playing football, that starts this total unrest on a university campus behind somebody's beard. And what do we do now that we're all locked up? I think that there are a couple of things that can happen. One of them is that you've got to continue to connect with people. And I think this is a good way to do that. And when it comes to black men, but I think that connection is key. And if you're not able to connect with people, seeking help through therapy, support groups, groups all over the internet, limiting the amount of information you get. There's information that you get from the CDC and reliable sources that I think is probably better than things you hear online, but don't go by me. The other thing, and this one I really hate, and I'm just gonna be honest with you, and that's we gotta exercise, get our minds and our bodies working together, and get out and do some. But the other part of all this is that we need to find ways to take a break from all the insanity. And I don't know, that means something different for everybody. Meditating, finding something you really enjoy doing that keeps you, and still stay safe. Those kinds of things. They've got to happen right now because we don't know how long all this is going to last.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
No, I think what you're saying is very true. And I also think a big, that stuck out to me is connecting. I think if there's anything that's highlighted for me in this time where you're not really able to socialize is how important connection actually is. And
well, being in the connection business, it's what I'm finding a lot in the last month. No, I guess it's 2 months now. People want to be heard. They want to hear their experience, don't want to feel alone. And that's part of the connection that I was talking about earlier. It doesn't really help. It's really hard just to be alone with your own thoughts and not have anywhere to let them out as an expression. It's one of the reasons why I have a job. But for now, I mean, there is a level of anxiety that transcends even depression at this point. And it's almost every client I have, it's the same kinds of things. It goes back to connection. And I feel really badly for those people who don't have someone like you were talking about, Andrea. Because it's partly my job to find ways for people to find other connections other than me. It's hard to find someone, particularly now, to connect with because you can't get out and make connections. It's a tough time for all of us. And I think for our community, it may even be more tough.
Just goes back to self-care, and people use that word casually, or sometimes they use it like an umbrella term, laying it out the way that you did, like meditating, exercising, communicating, connecting. All of these things are ways that people take care of themselves. All of these things are ways that people care for themselves. And I think being in quarantine and being sort of removed from your normal routine, removed from even family members sometimes, it has sort of forced people to either buckle down and learn about self-care, even if they don't understand the term, learn just to keep moving. It's forcing people to sort of check in with themselves to be like, what do I need today? Maybe I should call somebody, or I want to call somebody, but I don't have anybody to call. I think people are realizing a lot of the things that they need to feel sort of whole, to feel healthy, is more than just eating right. It's it's the way that we care for ourselves is sort of changing or being retuned or rethought about in this environment where it's hard to do the things that we would normally do.
People are, okay, I'm stuck in my house. I've always thought about looking at myself, so I think I'll do that. I'll be more introspective now, and look for answers inside that I didn't want to or have time to look for before, which is, I think, going to be a good thing all the way around.
So thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow Marcel. I'll put his information below in the description box. Also, if this is your first time here, welcome. But subscribe, hit that like button, comment below, share this video, all that good stuff. Bye, guys.